Hello everyone! My name is Dulce, the mascot of Lasercut Legends. I was made to be the object of your affection, so how about you give me all you got? Some of you may know me and some of you may not, but regardless of whichever way you sway, I'm hoping this video will be a wonderful introduction to a very long series of documenting my cosplay builds. To explain the team a little bit, Lasercut Legends is composed of my husband and I. Fen's the technological side of our little duo, handling machine work and other labor-intensive tasks. A ton of behind-the-scenes stuff, you know? Now for me, I like to think of myself as the pretty face of the brand, the more artsy side where I draw, paint, do all the nice finishing touches. Same dynamics apply to streaming too. For this first episode, I wanted to cover Marcille's staff from Dungeon Menshi. I think I started watching the show pretty early into its airing, and I immediately fell in love with Marcille. Around this time, I was already prepping for my local Ren Fair. I've been going for a few years now, and I've done regular and historical garb, but I've never done it in full cosplay. I asked my friend Buster if she'd duo with me, and she wanted to be Highlands, so here we are. Now here at Lasercut Legends, we love to make 3D printed props. There is something so cool about making anything you want out of seemingly thin air. We use an Anchor Make M5 FDM printer and print all our props out of PETG filament. We learned our lesson about PLA. Don't do what we did and print a whole shoulder cannon out of black PLA in 100+ degree SoCal weather. Trust us. Now we use PETG because it's great for the outdoors, incredibly strong, and most importantly, doesn't warp. In terms of our workflow, Fen handles all the 3D modeling, printing, gluing, resin coating, and rough sanding. He'll then hand it off to me, where I'll handle the high grit, final sanding, and painting. At least that's how it goes for most projects, but this time I was recovering from surgery and taking it super slow with her wig and little costume adjustments, so he took over most of the work. For Marcille's staff, I have to give a huge shout out to Lightning and Lace, the original 3D file designer. Please go check out their Etsy. Their files for the staff were super clean and we had no issues printing them. After reviewing the files, there were some cosmetic changes I wanted to have Fen make. I had him scale the entire staff a little bit larger for dramatic flair. I also asked him to print an extra middle section of the shaft since I'm pretty tall and wanted to better match Marcille's proportions in the show. Finally, I had him scale the little leaf sprout on top to be even bigger, so that it was more visible. Material-wise, while most of the staff is 3D printed, we did use a 3/4 inch wooden dowel in the center to help give it strength, as per the instructions by Lightning and Lace. And with that all out of the way, let's finally jump into this build. Cue the 3D printing! Once all the parts are finished being printed, the first step is to give them a pass of rough sanding. And with any sanding, do remember to wear a proper mask. Now, depending on the orientation the parts are printed in, some will have less cleanup than others. Thankfully, the long staff pieces that were printed vertically came out pretty clean, but the parts that make up the top circle were printed flat, so we need to knock down the roughness and layer lines left by the 3D printer. To do this, Fen is going to use some 80 grit sandpaper, a circular metal file, and a Dremel to get into the grooves. Y'all can see the difference between the top of the part and the side that had supports. Now that the rough sanding is done, it's time to start gluing the main staff together. To attach the 3D printed plastic parts to the wood dowel, Fen is going to use some expanding Gorilla Glue. This is his preferred glue for really strong bonds between plastic and non-plastic materials. It's got a pretty generous cure time, so if you make a mistake, you have time to fix it. Though, if you do use this glue, be careful around exposed joints. Because it expands, any excess is going to seep out and it'll look really ugly, so use it sparingly. You can buy this glue at most hardware stores. To help increase adhesion, Fen is going to wet the dowel with some water as recommended by the instructions. To glue the two 3D printed pieces together, Fen is using this side grip acrylic plastic cement. It's a specialty glue that we can only ever find on Amazon, but it is by far the best plastic glue for 3D prints that we've ever used. It's also got a decent curing time to make any adjustments if needed. Plus, once it dries, it's nearly unbreakable. While the glue for the staff cures, it's time to clean up the leaf sprout. You can see that the 3D printer left quite a lot of texture on the bottom, so Fen is going to give that a quick once-over with the Dremel. Since we've scaled the sprout model a little larger than the rest of the staff, Fen has to use a Dremel to widen the pocket it sits in so that he can have a better surface to glue to. And with the hole widened, the sprout can now be glued in properly. Now the top is ready to be glued together. Instead of a wooden dowel, these parts have cone-shaped registration keys that help fit into each other, so Fen is using those as a guide for connection. Then it's time to connect the two staff pieces together. This next part was done off camera, so I hope I can explain thoroughly enough for you guys. After the staff is fully glued together, the next step is to cover any seams so that it looks like one continuous piece instead of multiple glued together. To do this, Fen is going to use another favorite product of ours, Liquitex Professional Modeling Paste. All you have to do is add some water and smear it into the seams. Because it's water soluble, you can play around with the thickness as needed. Maybe a huge glob is necessary for a hole, or maybe you just need a thin paste for the layer lines. It's incredibly versatile and completely non-toxic, a wonderful alternative to something like automotive body filler. We were put onto it by cosplayer Breanna, so please give her dues. Once the Liquitex dries, we just sanded off any excess. After the Liquitex is sanded to a decent point, it's time for the strongest weapon in our surface finishing arsenal, XTC 3D resin. This stuff is a thick, self-leveling resin that we put on to smooth most of our 3D print builds. It does such a great job of evening surface imperfections that would otherwise take a ton of extra work to get perfect. It can cut out hours of hand finishing, especially on large props like this. If you ever plan to use this, please wear proper PPE and work in a well-ventilated area. So to make this resin, Fen is going to mix these two parts together in a 2-to-1 ratio and spread it out on some aluminum foil. He does this because if he kept it in the mixing cup, the heat generated would start to cure the resin prematurely. In keeping them out on the foil, that gives him a longer working time to spread it over the staff. After mixing an adequate amount of resin, all that's left is to brush it on and let it dry. I told him not to fuss about brushstrokes, since this staff was supposed to look like it was made out of reeds, so that texture was actually beneficial. Once the resin is cured overnight, it leaves this gorgeous, smooth, glossy shine all over the staff that we're gonna cover right up. It's time for primer. We really like using this automotive filler primer because it lays on pretty thick and helps fill in any leftover surface imperfections. It's also cheaper than Rust-Oleum, so it's a pretty decent alternative. With the staff primed, it's time to paint the base coat. We went with Rust-Oleum Satin Espresso Brown. The rest of the painting was all done by me. Problem is though, I didn't record it. At this point, we were days away from the first day of the fair, and I was home alone with a one-track mind. What I ended up doing was dry brushing multiple shades of brown with acrylic paint. I used the products on screen in different layers, trying to achieve a realistic wood grain effect. It took a bit of finagling, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. After dry brushing, it was time to paint the leaf sprout. I started by painting on some white acrylic paint to cover the espresso brown and create a base layer for brighter colors. Then I added some green. Because this is the only accent of color on the whole prop, I wanted it to stand out, meaning I didn't do any realistic shading. I think if I did, it would have been lost in any photos taken of me. And here's what the staff looks like after dry brushing and painting the leaf. You can see how the different values and tones of the browns really add to the texture, making Marcille's staff look more alive and real. Now it's time for the final step. To remove the glossy satin shine on the staff left by the paints, Fen is going to add a Krylon matte clear coat. This will help eliminate that shine, adding to the realism of a wooden staff as well as help protect the paint job. Now, let's get to that reveal. And with that, the first build of this cosplay series is finished. If you made it to the end, thank you so much for sticking around. Be sure to leave a little sprout in the comments to let me know that you made it this far. I have to reiterate my thanks to Lightning and Lace for providing the staff files. You can find their links and all the products we used in the description below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you'd like to support us directly, you could swing by during one of my streams here on YouTube, purchase from our shop at lasercutlegends.com, or commission us for your very own cosplay prop. I'll see you guys with our next build soon!